Hey folks, this is Dr. K, and in this video, I'm going to go through a tutorial for the creation of a button with a built-in delay. So that's a button you click, and then there's a delay, and then something happens. So this is pretty normal when you're doing front-end development because you might send a request to a server or something like that, and it takes a little time for something to come back. So let's go ahead and get started with this. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open my terminal. I have a developer folder in my user folder, and I try to put all my working directories here. So I'm going to create a directory called front end, where I'm going to store all my front-end projects. Okay, let's go into that. And there's nothing in there right now. So I want to create my application where I have the button. And I'm going to call that I'm going to call that delayed button. I'll call it delay button. Okay, so I'm just making a directory because this is just going to be a simple HTML project. So all I need for this is to create a directory, and I'll eventually put an index.html file in there. Okay, so I got my delay button folder. So I'm going to go ahead and cd into that. You don't have to do it this way, but I'm going to open, now that I'm inside the delay button folder, I'm going to open the delay button folder inside of VS Code. That's the shortcut for VS Code, so make sure you have VS Code installed on your machine. And there I go. Yes, I'm the author, so I'm going to trust myself. And then right here, I have sometimes trouble with my VS Code. I have two of these document things, but once I click on them, one of them goes away. So here's my delay button folder. That's my project. That's basically my project. I'm going to create a new file called index.html. Okay. And now I've got an HTML file, but I don't have any HTML in it. Fortunately, VS Code has Emmet, the Emmet application built into it, which gives you a bunch of really cool abbreviations. One of the nicest ones is just exclamation point. It'll tell you what, once you type it, it'll tell you what that's abbreviation for, which is all of this, which is just great. It's kind of like the structure of an HTML file. Okay, so I'm just going to hit enter and get in there. Let me expand this a little bit so that you can see all of that. Okay, so there's the structure of an HTML file. Well, I guess you can't see all of it, but that's good enough for now. I'm going to save this. All right, and then I'm going to make sure in VS Code you have the live server plugin in there. And I'm going to hit go live, and what that will do is that will open up this index.html file in a browser window. And there it is. How do I know this is the correct index.html file? Well, other than I've done this a lot of times before. Document is the title, and I can actually say delay button. I can change the title to delay button, and notice that when I save this file, that should change. Okay, there I go. I saved the file, and that has changed. And I'm going to put some things in the body. I'm going to put a header. Just say hello world, just to put something in there. But again, I'm using Emmet abbreviations, so I just need to put H1, and you can see that this is the abbreviation for H1 tags, an opening and closing H1 tag, and it puts the cursor in the middle. Isn't that nice? So I just need to type H1, and then I can just do something like hello world. All right, and again, once I save that, then it shows up in my live server. All right, and the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a button in there. Button. And I'm going to call this button delay button. Okay. Yeah, that's kind of weird. All right, what happened there? All right, let me try this again. Obviously, I did something wrong. So I'm going to put button here. And that is an abbreviation for that. So now it should work. Oh, maybe when I put the word button in there, it was doing an M in abbreviation. And really, that's probably a bad name for a button anyway. So I'm just going to put delay log. Okay. And then I will save this, and there's my button delay log. Now that's a terrible button. Anything that's a default is probably going to be terrible with regard to style. This button has 0 styling. So I want to style that, but before I style that, I want to put a specific font in there. So I'm going to go to Google Fonts, and everybody should know how to do this. So I'm just going to go over here and go to Google Fonts. I'm going to browse fonts, and usually I use Nunito or Roboto or something like that. Let's see. These are probably the most popular ones up front. Roboto is pretty popular. I want something that I have more than just one style on it. Like I don't want like a bold font that only has bold. That's why I use typically Nunito or Roboto. Okay, so I'm just going to use a Nunito, but use something else. Look something up. Actually, I'm not going to use. I'll use Open Sans. How about that? Okay, so here's Open Sans, and I'm going to need to expand this a little bit so you guys can see what's going on. I don't want to download the whole font family. I just want to download certain styles. So the normal style has a weight of 400. So you should know that as a front-end developer, you should just know that 400 is the default normal weight. So I'm going to click on this, and when I click on this, I get my selected family panel opening on the side here that says I've got Open Sans regular 400. So I'm also going to select regular 400 italic, and that will just add that to my cart essentially. And then the bold is 700. Okay, so I'm going to select the bold, and I'm going to select bold italic. Okay, and that's another thing you should just kind of know, that a weight of 700 is your default weight for a bold font. So here's how I can embed that font. I can either create a link to this, which I'd rather not do. I'd rather just import it in my CSS. So if I click import it, it's going to import this. Note that it imports, the import statement is between two style, an opening style element and an ending style element. So just know that when you're, like if you already have a style element and you paste that inside, then you'll have like double style elements and it'll give you an error. So just know that. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to go back to, I'll make this a little larger here. I'll go back here, and where do I want my style? The style section, if you have one, should be in your head section. Okay, I'm going to put it right at the end of my head section, and like I said, I'm not going to put style here because I've already copied the style tag. So I'm just going to paste this and save it, and now I have that Google font accessible. All right, and here's how to specify over here. If you look in the browser, it tells you how to specify that I want Open Sans. All right, sometimes it's a little bit tricky because it might have a space between words or something like that, or there might be no space between the words. So make sure you see that. So what I'm going to do is I want this button to have Open Sans. So I'm going to do a couple things with this button. I'm going to give it an ID. I'm going to give it a class. And I'm going to give it an on-click action. Okay, so let me first, and I'll tell you why I'm going to do all this. I'm not going to use this all at once, but the ID, I'm just going to call this delay button. Delay dash button. Okay, and for the class, I'm going to call the class. I'm just going to call the class, I don't like calling it button because there's already an element named button. So I'm just going to call it BTN. If I had more time, I'd think of a better name than that. I'm not too crazy about that name. But this is the class name. But I'm also going to use the onClick event attribute. OnClick. Okay, and this is going to call a JavaScript function. Okay, and the JavaScript function I'm going to call is going to just be named delay action. Okay, and I'm going to put parens there because that is going to be a function that I define in my body. All right. And by the way, when I save this in VS Code, first of all, it updates the web page because in the live server. All right. There's no change right now, but some of you may have noticed that it reformats the code too when you save it, which is really a nice feature. Okay, so let's go ahead and style this button. And when I do here, I'm going to split these, make these side by side, and show you what's happening. So here's my style. Okay. So this is where I'm going to put my CSS. So if I want to style the button, which I do, it has a class of BTN. So I'm going to give a style to that class. All right. I like to give styles to classes. All right, instead of IDs. I'm going to use the ID for something else, but I'm going to use the class for the styling. Now, one thing I mentioned here is that CSS rules apply to specific families. So I'm going to copy this font family or the accessing of the font family. This is just a font family property. And let me see here. I'm going to open this, And I'm going to paste what I just copied from Google Fonts. And I'm going to save this. Actually, it's so small that you might not see a change in that. So I'm going to wait. Whoops. I'm going to wait before I do that. And I do want to put a font family in there. But I want to make the font size larger. So I'm just going to say font size. Let's make it 1.5. 1.5 rem. I like working with rems when I'm not worried about the context. Rem is a root EM. EM is the width of M dash, but it's in the context of the default of the font you're using. So I'm tying this back to the root font. And then when I save this, you can see that this becomes larger. Now let's see if I can put that font family in there and if it's noticeable, if it's a noticeable difference. I think it's probably by default. It's probably using Verdana or not Helvetica, but Arial or Verdana or something like that. So I'm going to go ahead and paste that font family in here. And let's see if we can see a change in this. When I save it. Ready? I'm saving. A slight change. I think the G is different, and it looks a little nicer to me. So I've got my font there, and what I want to do with every button, I want to give it some styling beyond the font. Okay, so the background color is probably one of the most important things you can do when styling a button. I'm going to give mine a background color of Dodger blue. That's kind of the default color I typically use when I'm just experimenting. And you can see that it gave it a default, a background color of that blue. Now, there's a problem with this button, and I will suggest that I'll give you 5 seconds to pause the video and see if you can answer me what is the problem with this button. There are actually two problems in my view, but there's one very important problem. Okay, 5 seconds starting now. Okay, the problem with this button is that it's not readable. Okay, it's not very readable. It's gonna be challenging for people with even slight vision impairments to read that, because it's black on a kind of a darkish blue here. And that's even hard for me to read when I have my glasses on, okay? And if I hover over this button, let me see what happens. I'm going to open the DevTools. And I think when I hover over this button, yeah, okay, so, yeah, there you go. This is good. So when I hover over this button, it tells me the color of the font, of the background. It tells me the padding, which I didn't put in any custom padding, so that's the default padding. And it tells me some accessibility things. I can't move my mouse down there or else that hint will go away. But it says that the contrast is 6.48. Now, it's giving me a green check mark for that, saying that is a fine contrast. But I don't believe that. To my eyes, there's not. It may be that the blue is just so saturated. That black on that blue looks not very readable to me. So let me see what happens when I change the text to white. So right now, it's giving me a contrast of 6.48. I think it usually you want something above 5 or something like that. But let me see what happens when I change that to white. 6.48. And remember that for me, will you? All right, so I'm going to get rid of this sidebar just so I can work with this. So the background color and the foreground color is always just color. Okay. So let's do white here. And now I'm going to save this. And I think it was 6.48 with black. Okay. And to me, that looks significantly more readable. But let's see what this says. All right, okay, now it's saying accessibility. Still saying that's black. I think I have to hover over that. Now it's saying the contrast is 3.23. That's weird. It said, I think I was hovering over something else. 3.23. Let me just change this again to black, just to satisfy my own curiosity here. Maybe I was not hovering over the text of the button. Sometimes I have to click that on and click that off. Yeah, it says 6.48. That is very surprising to me. But anyway, to my eyes, and I will look into this a little bit more, but to my eyes, the white is definitely, I don't think any designer would disagree that the white is more appropriate and more readable. Okay, so we have this. I asked you for two things that were wrong with this. I think readability was one of them. I don't think that is a problem anymore. But I also think that the border is a problem. I'm using the default border. I haven't changed the border property. And what that does is it's very hard to see here. But let me see if I can increase the size of this. Okay, but what it does is it gives you one of these beveled pseudo 3D type borders. Okay, so you can see there's gray on the top and on the left, and there's black on the right and on the bottom. That was a style that was popular with buttons, when the internet first came out. You should not use that. You should always set your own border and not use the default border. So I'm going to go back to the original size here. And I'm going to get rid of that beveled border. They call that a bevel, by the way. Color white. And I'm going to put a border of none. I'm going to get rid of the border altogether. And it's not always a great idea to get rid of the border altogether. There, I just did it. Without giving it some kind of, pop out, effect that looks like it's coming off the page. So typically what people do, you can give it a border of black. Sometimes people like this effect. I can give it solid black, 2 pixels. 2 pixels solid black. That's weird. That looks like I still have a beveled border, which is very strange. Oh, 2px1. It probably didn't understand that and went back to the default border. So let me do that now. Okay, now it's all solid black. Okay, so I had that 1 in there. Okay, so I think we're good with the colors of the button. I'm going to give this a shadow. So I'm going to change the border to none. Okay, there, I just got rid of the border. And the other thing I don't like is the text is right up against, especially the bottom of that button. don't put any element up against any other element, or in general as a rule of thumb, or don't put text right up against the side of or the borders of something that it's in. So how do I fix that? I put some padding in. So let's see. I like to put my padding before the border. And I'm going to put some padding on the top and some padding on the sides. And I think if I put 2 elements of padding, or 2 arguments for the padding, the first will go to the top and the bottom, and the second will go to the sides. Let me see if that's correct. Let me put 20 points, just so it's obvious to me. Yeah, I think it did put the 20 points of padding on 20 pixels of padding on the side, but I think the top has too much, and I'd rather use M's for padding, I think, so it's relative to the text in there. So I'm going to put 0.5 EM and 2 EM, and I think that'll give me plenty of padding on the sides. I still think that padding on the top and the bottom is kind of ridiculous. Let's try 0.25 EM. Okay, that looks better. And then 1 EM, 1.5. Okay, that looks like a reasonable button size to me, and that looks like reasonable padding to me. Now what I want to do is, now that I got the border working, I want to give a little bit of corner, rounded corners to this button, and for that I need border radius. And I usually start off with 5 pixels and see what that does. Okay, that put nice little rounded corners on there. I'm pretty happy with that. Let's see, what else? How else can I style this button? Oh, I said I wanted to give it a drop shadow because I didn't put a border on the button. So I want to separate it from the page a little bit. I'll give it a drop shadow, and for that it's box shadow. There it is. And box shadow takes multiple elements. The first one I think is the X offset, and for the X offset, so basically that's left, the shadow on the left or the right, I can't remember, but and the reason I can't remember is because I usually just use X, 0 pixels for the X offset, and then I use something like 5 pixels for the Y offset, and I know that's shadow on the bottom. And I think the reason it didn't do anything because I need a color for the shadow, and it probably used white by default or something like that. And I also need to put the blur on the shadow, so I'm going to use 5 pixels for that. And for my color, I'm going to do 8888. Okay, and there's no abbreviation for that, but if any of you have dealt with hex values, if you say 888, for example, oh, it doesn't like that. This is not a comment there. If you say if you say 888, this is actually 8888. It just doubles everything. So it's 88 red, 88 R, 88 red, 88 blue, 88 green. Okay, which we're getting close to black here. Okay. Actually, let me see what this does. Yeah, so it put that in here. Now, I also want to give it a little bit of opacity. So I'm going to use another 8, and because, you know, when it's rendered, it will double this stuff. Like, actually, let me see if this will even tell me what that color is. So I'm just hovering over the shadow. And not really. It just tells me it's a bunch of zeros. But usually that the last 8 is alpha value. So you have RGB, okay, which is your standard red, green, blue, and then you have RGBA, and that last A, that's your alpha. Okay, so that should be not quite. Whoops. Sorry, I saved the wrong thing. That should be not quite black there. That should be black with a little bit of transparency. Okay, but anyway, I like this shadow. I'm going to keep it. And what other styling thing do I want to do here? I think that's pretty much all I want to do. Okay, as far as the styling right now. Now, the one thing I haven't done here is when I hover over this button, nothing happens. When you hover over a button, you should get feedback that you are hovering over a button. Typically, that means that the background becomes darker and the arrow changes to a finger. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Those are different styles, and I'm trying to remember. So I just created the style for my class BTN. So I'm going to create a style for BTN : hover. Okay, and what this : hover is, that is called, and I get these confused, that is called a pseudo element. Let me make sure that that is correct. CSS, there's pseudo classes and pseudo elements, and I always forget which one is which. So pseudo elements are, no, I want, hover is a pseudo class. A pseudo element is the 2 colons. And pseudo class is 1 colon. Okay, what are the most common pseudo classes in CSS? Hover. There it is. Okay, so I want a pseudo class. I want the pseudo class hover. So try not to make the same mistake as me. Know what the difference between a pseudo class and a pseudo element is. All right, let's go back to our button. And now we have a pseudo class. We're using the pseudo class hover in order to say, basically, when you're hovering over this class button. All right. So when I'm hovering over that class of button, what I want is to change the background color. I'm going to change it to royal blue. I know that is darker than Dodger blue. And I'm also going to change the cursor, which is by default an arrow, to a pointer, which is the hand. Okay, so let me save this. Oops, let me save this in Xcode. Okay, so now when I go here and, click on my browser window and then I hover over this, look at that. The cursor changes to a hand and the background becomes royal blue. Okay, you could, be more precise in darkening the background 10% and do things like that. But I think this is fine for me for now, and I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, so what else do I want to do? Now I want to do the delayed action. Okay, I want to write the delayed action function. So I've already got that an on-click event will trigger the delayed action function, but I don't have a delayed action function. The script section where you put the JavaScript goes in your body. So I'm going to put it at the end of the body. Okay, so there's my script section. Oops. Okay, and I'm going to write my function. Now you could do this. Okay, but a more common way to write functions in JavaScript nowadays is to just make a const, okay, and call it give it the function name, delay action. All right, and then say that equals, and then you write a function literal. And a function literal is like a string literal or integer literal, basically. So you're saying that this constant, this variable, is equal to this function literal. The way you write a function literal is using an arrow function. Okay, so you put parens at the beginning. Then you put an arrow, and then you put what you want that function to do. Okay, then you put the body of the function essentially. All right, so we are here, and what I want this button to do is, well, let's do something simple right now. Let's just console log something. I'm going to console log hello. Let me see what happens when I put a comma between hello and new date. Okay. All right, so let's go here. I'm going to select the console. I'm going to clear the console of anything, and then I'm going to click this button. And it says hello, and then puts a space, and then puts the date. Okay, that's exactly what I wanted it to do, so we're good to go. But I want this to be a button that has an internal delay to it, so it simulates, accessing something from the server. So let's to simulate that, I'm going to use the timer function, okay, called the name is timeout function. Set timeout. Sorry, the name was escaping me. Okay, it's a timeout function. It's called set timeout. That makes sense. So I want to use the timeout function. Actually, I'm going to keep this date here because when I click this button, I want the date to show in the log, but also after the timeout, I'm going to do a 2-second timeout. I might change it to 3 seconds a little bit later. So set timeout is a function that takes two parameters. The first parameter is a callback function. Okay, the first argument is a callback function. So I need a callback function, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another function literal here. Okay, so there's my callback function, and what's going to go in here is code that executes after the timeout. And then for the second argument, so that's the first argument, so I need to put a comma there. Whoops, a comma there. And the second argument is going to be the timeout in milliseconds, okay, the duration of the timeout. So I'll start out with 2,000 milliseconds, which is 2 seconds. And then I said the code that executes after the timeout. Right now, let's just make that a console log again. And now let's say after timeout, or I'll just say after delay. I'll put a comma and then I'll put new date. Then I'll save that, and I'll go back to, these are my developer tools, right? Go back to my developer tools, I'll clear the console, and now I'll click this button. And I should see, what I should see is, I should see a date with, it'll be a date time, and the time will specify when I clicked this button. And then there should be a 2-second delay, and then it should print the date again with the time. So let's do that. Okay, fantastic. So here it is, 18, 27, and 30 seconds. And it printed, again, after the delay, 18, 20 seconds, and 18, 27, and 32 seconds. Okay? Very, very cool. So let's clear that again. Now, one of the things that I've got going on here is if I keep hitting this, it will keep printing the same thing. But if we're simulating, requesting something from a server and waiting for that thing to come back, you don't want to be able to keep hitting this button, okay, when you're waiting for the data to return from the server. So I'm going to clear that log, and I want to disable this button. Okay, I want to disable this button while the timeout, or while the delay is occurring. So how do I disable this button? Well, it's another one of these pseudo classes. When you disable a button, the disabled, let me see, I'm going to make sure I'm doing this right. Actually, I'm going to disable this button by adding the disabled attribute to this button. Okay? And I'm in JavaScript, so to add the disabled attribute programmatically, what I need is a handle or a reference to this button. Okay? So, and that's where I'm going to use the ID, delay button. All right? So I'm going to say, okay, that's after delay. So I'm going to say I'm going to log the date. And then before I call the timeout function, I'm going to create, let's see, I want to make sure I'm doing the right thing here. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm doing the right thing here. I want Yeah, I can do this before or after I log the date. I'd rather declare my declare my variables at the start of the function, actually. So I think I'm going to do this one before. So I want to declare a constant called button. All right. And I want to use JavaScript to say select this specific button. So I'm going to select this specific button by the ID selector. So what I need to do is I need to get to the document. So I need to get to the DOM, and I need to do a query selector. Okay, so now I just put what I want to put in here, and I want this exact button. Okay, and that's why I'm using the ID. I'm not using BTN because I don't want it to get a bunch of buttons. Right now, this is the only button with a class of BTN, so it's not a big deal. But it's not really, I want to expand on this code in the future. So I want to query this specific button, and the selector I'm going to use is hash delay button. So it's going to conform with that ID. Now I'm going to just shrink this down a bit and expand this over a bit. And I'm going to make sure that's saved. So have I done anything? No. I said the reason I wanted to do that is because I want to disable this button, right? So I got a reference to the button. And now after I log my date, I want to give this button a disabled attribute. Okay? So now I can say button set attribute, and disabled. I'm pretty sure that's the attribute I want to set. I'm going to set that to true. So now it sets the disabled attribute. Well, what it does is it actually gives the button a disabled attribute. Okay. If I set this to false here, it would work the exact same way, because as long as it has something there, as long as that attribute has some value other than null, this is going to be a disabled button. Okay. Well, we can play around with that. You can play around with that to convince yourself of it. If you set that to false, and the value doesn't matter as long as there's some value and as long as it has a disabled attribute that's non-null. Kind of weird. It's just one of the peculiarities of, not peculiarities, but it's just the way that this particular attribute works. All right, so I set the disabled to true, and honestly, I don't know what this is going to do now. I'm going to save this, and I'm going to click the button. Okay, so nothing happens stylistically. But look, I'm clicking the button again, and I'm not getting anything logged. Okay, so it doesn't look like it, but this button's disabled. Well, that's a problem. A disabled button should look disabled. You're not giving the user any feedback if it doesn't look disabled. Okay, so let's make it look disabled. I'm setting disabled to true. So the way I'm going to make it look disabled is there is a disabled pseudo class. Just like there's a hover pseudo class. You can style something when you're hovering over it. You can style something when it's disabled. So here I've got BTN button hover. Okay, I'm going to do BTN disabled. Okay, so this is going to be the style of my button when it's disabled. And what I want to do is I want to change this to a lighter blue background. Again, the background is probably one of the most important attributes of a button. I'm going to do light sky blue. Okay. And then I'm going to reload this. Okay, I saved it. I think that's right. I'm going to clear the console. Now when I click this, it becomes light sky blue, and I can see that it's disabled. The problem is it prints after the delay. It prints the date after the delay, but it doesn't enable it again. All right. So one other thing I want to do while it's disabled, I want to change the text on the button. So we just notice that problem that it's not enabled afterwards. Actually, let me take care of that right now. Okay, so where do I do that? I do that in the callback function to the set timeout. Okay, so there's my set timeout. There's my callback function right there. And I'm going to log something after the delay, but I'm also going to remove the disabled attribute. So I still have a handle to the button, and I'm going to remove attribute disabled. Okay, and now what happened is after 2 seconds, I should get that color back. So let's see. I'm going to reload this. Okay, it's sky blue, and it's back to Dodger blue. All right, so that's working great. And let's see. Anything else I want to do while it's disabled? Yes, while it's disabled, I want to, again, I'm simulating waiting for the server. So I'm going to do like a loading ... text on this. All right. So I set the attribute to disabled here, and now I want to change the text of the button. And I'm going to use the property text content. I'm just going to set the text content to loading to simulate something that is loading. So now let's look at what it does. Oh yeah, that's pretty nice. Oh, that's interesting. So the text is never changed back. The style comes back, the Dodger blue comes back, but the text never comes back. So I got to make sure I fix that text. Okay, so once I remove the attribute disabled, I also want to put the text back to where it was. But to do that, I actually need to save the text. I need to get the text right here. So I'm setting the text here, setting the attribute. But as soon as I get that button, I'm going to create another constant called original button text. And I'm just going to do button text. I'm just going to use text content, the property text content. Okay. And then after I remove the disabled attribute so that it's no longer disabled, I'm just going to say button text content equals original button text. So that should change it back to delay log. All right, let's check it out. Loading, and after 2 seconds, delay log. I'm going to change that to 3 seconds because I think 2 seconds is kind of short to see what's going on, and I'm going to clear the console. All right. So I think there's one last thing I want to do here, if I can remember correctly. I think this is the last thing I want to do. I want to, while I'm saying loading, I want to kind of give the user the impression that it really something's happening. So I want that loading text to kind of pulsate. And let's see if I can get it to do that through a simple animation. And I'm going to have to refer to my notes for this because it's easy for me to get how to do this. This is a simple animation, so it's not too bad. But so I've got a styling for the disabled button. Okay. Okay, so I see what I'm supposed to do here. I'm going to create a class called Fade. Okay? Or Pulsing. How about Pulsing? So I'm going to create a class in my CSS right after button disabled called Pulsing. And what that class is going to consist of is an animation. Okay. So I'm just going to put here animation. So whenever something has this class, okay, well, actually let me show you the animation first and it'll become a little clearer. So the animation okay, so we got a class called .pulsing. So I'm going to call the keyframe animation pulsing too, pulsing also. All right, and so this is the name of the animation. This is the name of the keyframe animation. This is the name of the class that I'm going to attach to it. This is the name of the keyframe animation, and I have to set. Oops, sorry. And I have to set a timer for it. So I'm going to set 1 second. Okay. And I'm going to keep this animation going because I want it to be a pulsing effect. I'm going to keep the animation going until the class is removed from the button. Okay. So as long as this class is attached to the button, it's going to play this animation. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm just going to say play it infinitely. Okay, don't stop after 1 second. Just keep going, keep going, keep going. All right, and I will programmatically remove the class, and then when I remove the class from that button, it'll stop playing the animation. This will all become clear. Okay, so I've got now this pulsing class, and I've got what I claim is an animation called pulsing. That's going to be my @keyframe animation. So I'm going to define that with @keyframes. And the identifier needs to be pulsing. Okay, it needs to be the same name that is. And then what I'm going to say here is I'm going to say when I'm 0% done with this at my 0% keyframe, I'm going to style this. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to style the color to light sky blue. Let me see. I'm not sure why that's not giving me suggestions? It's because of this. Keyframes pulsing. It should not be dot pulsing. Okay, and then it gives me the light sky blue color. Okay, so I had a syntax error there. All right, so when 0% of the keyframes are finished, the color of whatever element this class is attached to will be light sky blue. Okay, the color meaning the color of the text, not the background color, the color of the text. All right. And then when the animation is halfway done, okay, I'm going to set the color to white. Okay, so when the animation is halfway done, it's going to look like the text is going to be white. Okay, all the way white. And then when the animation is 100% complete, now remember this animation is going to go on infinitely, so the start of the animation will happen at 0 seconds. The animation will be halfway complete at a half a second, and it'll be 100% complete at 1 second. So it's going to go through this over and over and over again. So at 100%, I want the styling to be that the color is, again, since I want this to loop, I want it to be light sky blue again. Okay, and you'll see what happens when I actually do this. Okay. I think there's my pulsing class, and it's playing the animation pulsing infinitely, and each animation takes 1 second. So it's just going to loop through these because I've got this infinite here. And then the pulsing keyframes, which defines the styles to my animation, says when I start the animation, the color of the text is light sky blue. Halfway through, the color of the text is white. When I finish the animation, the color is light sky blue again, which makes sense because you want it to seem like it's fading in and out. I'm going to save this, and I'm going to see what happens. Okay, let's see if we get this pulsing effect. We do not get this pulsing effect. Okay, and I think I know why we didn't get this pulsing effect. We didn't get the pulsing effect because I did not attach the pulsing class to the button. So I'm going to go back to my JavaScript code, and I'm going to say, hey, here's the button. Once you have logged the date, okay, and you've disabled the button, I can do it anywhere here. I think I'll do it here. How do I attach a class to the button? It's not an attribute. It's a class. Every button has a class list. Okay? And this class list, I'm going to add to this class list. I'm going to add a class to the class list. And what I'm going to add is pulsing. Now be careful here. It's adding the class pulsing. In my CSS, I'm denoting the class. Where am I denoting that class? By saying dot pulsing. And dot just means, hey, this is a class. All right? But I want to add pulsing, and not dot pulsing here, because this is like the class list. When you say class equals, that's where you you don't say dot there. You just say the class name. So pulsing. All right. So I'm going to add pulsing here to the class list. Then I'm going to disable things. Actually, I want to put the pulsing. I want to add that class last here. I don't think it matters because everything's pretty much going to run so close together. And then once I am done, once I have removed this, disabled and set the original button. Actually, I'm going to stop that animation before I reset the text because I don't want it to even flash the original button text. So I'm going to say button class list and then remove pulsing. Okay, and now I'm hoping finally it does what we want it to do. When I click it, it should say loading, and it should look like it's kind of pulsing, and then after like 3 seconds, it should go back to the original button. So let's give it a shot here and hope it works. Beautiful. Okay, so that is a quickish tutorial on a loading button. And really, if you're a front-end developer, you need to know everything in this file. You need to know how everything in this file is working together. That's pretty important. And I think this is a great tutorial because it kind of gives you a taste of all of the JavaScript, the CSS, and even the HTML. You should know even at the beginning of your front-end development learning. Okay, that's it for now. I will see you guys in the next video.